Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Dan Clark. As COVID-19 continues to surge across much of upstate New York, there is a new development. The pandemic has now entered the race for governor. Congressman Tom Suozzi threw his hat in the ring this week, becoming the fourth Democrat to enter the race. And he didn't waste any time going after current Governor Kathy Hochul on the state's response to COVID-19. Attorney General Letitia James, who's also running for governor, did the same the week of Thanksgiving. Both say the state could be doing more to stop the spread, like a targeted approach in hotspots and more access to testing. But Hochul said this week that it isn't like last April and that the state shouldn't treat it that way.
I'm not prepared to shut down schools or the economy at this time, no. That is not a necessary response. That would be considered an overreaction to the fact that this is not our first, second, or third. It's our fourth variant. We're dealing with it.
And I'm sure that's just the first of many disagreements that we'll see during the campaign. Let's talk about that and more with Politico's Bill Mahoney and our own Daryl Camp. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
So Suozzi's in the race, Bill. That brings us to four. Suozzi's considered more of a moderate Democrat, kind of like a Kathy Hochul Democrat, as opposed to like a Tish James Democrat, which we view as a little bit further to the left sometimes. What does this mean for the race for governor? Is it a blow to Hochul?
It probably doesn't help her. It's unclear how much of an impact it'll actually have. So far, he hasn't registered too much in the polls, and he's got a ways to go before many people know his name throughout the state. But he is running in a lane that's to the right of her, as you mentioned, which makes it a little bit trickier because we've kind of had Jumaane Williams and Tish James running to her left. And she's been moving to kind of claim the rightmost 60% of the party, which is more than enough for a majority,
Yeah.
But if he's inching his way between the far right and the center of the party and where she's kind of at, then that does cut into the share of the party she can presumably claim. And it's pretty clear that's the path that he's setting. He says he's not running as a moderate. He says he's not running in the Cuomo lane, but he is running in the Andrew Cuomo lane of the Democratic Party.
Yes, that is. I see him very ideologically like Andrew Cuomo. Hopefully he doesn't share other traits of Andrew Cuomo. Well, I guess we'll wait to see. Daryl, you have spent the week talking to political analysts about this race for governor. Mm-hmm. What's the status right now? It's very early. I mean, I don't know if anybody necessarily has a leg up aside from the current governor, because she's not an incumbent technically because she rose to the seat, but they typically have the advantage, and she has that power of being in office and doing things the next couple of months. What have analysts told you?
Basically exactly what you just said. It is way too early to call a real favorite, but the early favorite is Kathy Hochul, and it seems like dead last is a coin flip between Tom Suozzi and Jumaane Williams, mostly because in a sense, there are two primaries happening simultaneously. It is the moderate Democrats and you have the progressive Democrats, and between those two groups, people are going to choose their favorites, and then they're going to narrow it down. So it's kind of like a semifinal, more or less. So I think after the conventions next year, we'll have a better idea of what's going on.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point of the Tish versus Jumaane and the Hochul versus Suozzi kind of things. At the end of the day, I guess it would depend if any of them drop out at some point. If polling looks really bad for one of them, I think maybe the one with the least name recognition might actually be Tom Suozzi right now.
He might have the most difficult path. Granted, he does probably share more characteristics with winners of past gubernatorial primaries than anybody else in the field, and he is running in the lane that Andrew Cuomo won on. But that being said, there are basically two paths to get on the ballot. One, you can get support from 25% of the members at the convention, or two, you can just collect petitions to get on there. Collecting petitions, either you need a lot of money and basically drain down the resources of your campaign and not leave a lot of money for advertisements or things like that, or have a lot of volunteers in pretty much every corner of the state who are willing to go out and collect petitions for you. Jumaane Williams is probably more likely to have that than Tom Suozzi.
Yeah.
He has supporters in places like Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse. I know Tom Suozzi's begun to reach out to people in Buffalo. I was there when he was campaigning for Byron Brown a month ago. But I just don't know if there's, this base of people in Binghamton who are ready to knock on doors to get Tom Suozzi on the ballot yet. There's time for that to change. Certainly he could pull that together by March. But Jumaane Williams probably has that now, and that probably makes him, if we're going with the way too early rankings of where the candidates stand, I would probably place him in third place at the moment, with once again the caveat that we are a long ways away and there's plenty of room for things to change.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that you can't discount the organizing power of the far left faction of the party. I mean, as you said, Byron Brown, we saw in the Buffalo mayor's race that he some would say, was complacent. He really just kind of thought that he was going to coast to victory in that primary, whereas India Walton organized these Democrats and was able to win that out. It's going to be a really interesting dynamic there. But it is really early, so I don't want to opine on this way too much. Let's talk about the transcripts that were released this week. The AG released some more transcripts from her probe into Andrew Cuomo and the sexual harassment allegations. We now have testimony from Melissa DeRosa, who was the secretary to the governor, the highest ranking unelected position in government. Rich Nazapardi, his head comms person, other staffers. Bill, what was your big takeaway from this, reading these transcripts and going through all of it? I should say, I don't know if any of us had read all of them. It's thousands of pages. Yeah.
I don't think there was anything too surprising in this round. This was largely the Cuomo people who we heard talking anytime Cuomo had a press conference pretty much in the spring, summer.
Right.
But the one thing that this reinforced is that pretty much everybody who worked for him and was part of his circle stood by him throughout this, and there was no... We saw the text between some of his top aides and advisors, and there wasn't a whole lot of stuff like maybe he should resign, maybe he should apologize and admit guilt. Like, it was all just like, how shall we band together and destroy anybody who's trying to take him down? And they were very loyal with him right up to the end. And even when they were doing these interviews, most of them were very willing to stick by the former governor.
Yeah, what an interesting dynamic in his inner circle. We had some people like Liz Smith, who is a communications advisor, who actually advised Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign and then went on to help Andrew Cuomo during this scandal time. She was kind of advising them to cool down a little bit, whereas Melissa DeRosa really, really wanted to go hard against these women and find ways to discredit their allegations. That was interesting to me, and what I took away from this is it was really an inside look into their strategy to discredit the women and try to get the governor's public image more positive. Daryl, you were watching the Cuomo videos throughout the week. Mm-hmm. What did you take away from this?
More or less what his detractors said about him personally, about his ego. If you look at the context in those videos, you go, okay, I can kind of understand that. The transcripts don't necessarily translate entirely to his frame of mind and the intonation. You can't pick up on that in just words. And one of the viral moments from this week, obviously, was Jim Malatras. In his relation to the sexual harassment allegations in a loose way, the transcripts were from before that, but people are now questioning whether or not he is fit to run SUNY. And about a month ago, when the charges against Cuomo were released, I had said that there was a chance that those could restore faith in institutions, but it was all a dream, honestly, because at this point, it seems like the more you read the transcripts and the more you see how much the inner circle is insulated, you realize, oh no, even now, Jim is still defending, in a sense, the Cuomo administration. He's a wanted man, and everybody knows. So obviously, Kathy Hochul doesn't have the power to remove him. That's up to the SUNY board. But pressure is going to mount because it's an election year. So at some point, she's going to have to go, hey, I said I would drain the swamp, so to speak. So it's about that time.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that she can't remove him. That's an important point. It's up to the SUNY board. We do have to leave it there. We have the transcripts on our website. We'll link to them for everybody there. But Politico's Bill Mahoney and our own Daryl Camp. Thank you both.